the majestic sense of victory. You have heard it said that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Yet the full potential of that so basic idea is never realized by man until he begins to increase the potential to that point where he is fulfilling it to the best of his particular ability, recognizing that everyone on earth has a different capacity for service or for the use of the law. We'll call it an objectivity. We should realize individually then that one man's capacity may differ from another's, but all should within their own personal world recognize that wherever they are now, they can be a great deal further than they are now because they are not self-realized people. Now, what is the role of the majestic sense of victory in all of this? I don't care what you want of God. Unless you go out after it, it will not come to you. This is one thing you should remember. And inasmuch as all of life has problems, the overcoming of those problems is one of the particular things that we have to do in order to manifest our mastery. Now, what role does the majestic sense of victory play in all of this? A great deal. Because as we think, so we are. Therefore, we have to recognize the potential of each individual to overcome whatever problem he has. One of the reasons we have such lingering delays in the overcoming of these things is because we do not have a majestic sense of victory. And a majestic sense of victory is a tangible creation of thought, which actually requires meditation by the students. And so that the phrase or title which I am bringing forth is itself a mantra. And if you want to understand it correctly, then let me call it victory's mantra, albeit he has brought it to you through me. Now, I'm only the open door, a majestic sense of victory. So if all of you in this room will get up every morning and will say from 7 to 10 times as you tune in with your presence, I am a majestic sense of victory, you will actually be drawing to yourself the proper feeling, which will gradually through the weeks and months ahead clarify itself and produce the miracle of the state of consciousness which I am describing to you as a majestic sense of victory. Now, the way you do it, of course, is first of all, think I am. I am. Immediately equate this with God. You are the triangle in the physical plane of consciousness. God is the triangle in the spiritual plane. As you place them together and invert them, you have the star of victory, or the Star of David. So you say, I am. You draw your interlaced triangles. You have the first triangle with the 2 points upward and 1 point downward, showing spirit descending into matter. Then you have your base triangle with its base in matter and the 2 lines going upward toward the apex or the Christ manifestation. In the center of this, you put the words, I am. Now, what am I? I am a majestic sense. Now, why do we use the word majestic? Because no ordinary sense is enough to describe what we are talking about. We are referring to the majesty of the presence. And this is the one divine right of kings that you can still accept today, which is the kingship of your own I am presence, which the scriptures say, I will make you kings and priests unto God. So to be a king and priest unto God, you have to realize that I am a majestic sense of victory, which means, simply put, the power to overcome outer conditions, to bring yourself under subjection to your higher self. This is one of the most important efforts that we can make, because it is a road that has an end, and the end is the attainment of life's victory. Now, you are not going to get there just by idling along the road. You have a clutch on your car, and as long as that clutch is held in, the car is going nowhere. And we hold our clutches in and spin our wheels or spin our motor without going anywhere because we do not actually have what Master El Morya calls goal-fittedness. G-O-A-L, goal-fittedness. We more or less sort of lob around on the beach. We're enjoying the sun. We like to hear the surf pound on the shore. And all of this is very good. The state of mind that I sometimes call the idle mind. I'll say to people, you put your mind in idle gear. And that's what many people do. Now, a certain amount of idle gearedness is perfectly permissible. It's good for the brain occasionally to rest. But don't become the kind of a person that enjoys this state all the time and never understands the need to summon, or as St. Paul puts it, gird up the loins of your mind. When you think of the loins of the mind, you must remember that the mind apparently has 4 corners to it. And I'll use this piece of Kleenex here. And I see girding up the mind not as holding on to one end of the mind where everything runs out, or holding on to 2 ends of the mind where everything still comes down the chute, or 3 ends of the mind where you still have a little spillway here where quite a bit can go out. You've got to be able to control the 4 lower bodies of man by the mind. And then you've got a package which itself is complete. And you've got to remember this, because most people do not understand themselves. They do not realize that the mind is a tangible activity and that it can be gathered up. Now, one of the problems that people have then is this idle brain, this idle gear, where they just sort of coast along, and if the crowd goes one way and they start a snake dance, then everybody's putting their hands on someone else's shoulders and they're going right along with the snake dance. You can't be that way if you want the majestic sense of victory. You have to be able at will to stand behind the reality itself and say to people, I am looking for the light. But you don't have to say it with any word. You understand? On the surface, you look like you're part of the snake dance. They don't see what's going on inside of you. But if you let it out of the bag, if you let the cat out of the bag, you're going to encounter a lot of opposition that is unnecessary, and it will not deliver you into the hands of God. It will just keep you fighting a battle with people who will never change their mind until they come to the same place that you come to. And when they come to that place, then they're ready. Until they come to that place, they're not ready. So why should you engage the teeth of your energies in this foolish piece of business, as I myself have done many, many times, only to find out that all you're doing, as St. Paul says, fighting is one who beats the air. You remember Don Quixote with his windmills? Well, that's the way a lot of people are. They're just throwing away tons of energy and never accomplishing anything. So the whole idea and the beauty of the light is the development of the majestic sense of victory, which I wish to assure every one of you tonight is yours. It belongs to each one of you. It is your sovereign right and reality. You do not have to think that this is some prerogative of the messengers, or that it's some prerogative only of the ascended masters. It is your prerogative and right to take it, but not to take it and display it to humanity in order to make people see how great I am. No, how great thou art. Our role is to glorify the God collectively within us and individually within us per se. And as we do this, we develop this majestic sense of victory. And what a wonderful sense it is, because it is the Christ sense. It is centered in the 6-pointed star of victory. And it brings people to a realization that when they attain, they will have had a role in it, even though God does it because the great tide of the universe is flowing in only one direction. We ourselves, by casting ourselves into the mainstream of this flow, will be carried on. And naturally, when the stream is going the right way and we're in the stream, if we just go ahead and float, we may go down the river with the stream, but we're going to go a lot faster if we paddle. And this is why I say to you, there is nothing wrong in paddling by developing a majestic sense of victory, which becomes an attractive magnetism of a spiritual nature which will pull out of the universe the power that you need and require to attain your victory. Now I take the parable of the unjust judge and the widow who came along to the courthouse, and the judge was coming out smoking his black cigar, and he hadn't had his breakfast yet, and he was on his way over to have a cup of coffee and a little breakfast, and then he was coming back to sit on the bench. And the woman was parked out there. She knew she couldn't talk to him in his office, so she decided she was going to stand outside the courthouse until he came. And when he came out of the courthouse and was puffing on his cigar, she come up to him and grabbed a hold of his coattails. He naturally spun around because he was his honor, and he didn't like the idea of anyone pulling on his coattails. So he said, "What do you want, madam? Unhand me." And she said, "I have a petition for you, and I want you to sign it. It's very important. I've been before you, I've written to you, and you haven't answered me." And he said to her, "Madam, I'm too busy now. Please leave me alone, or I'll have to cite you in some manner here. Now leave me alone." She said, "But your honor, you've got to," and he was gone. Well, the next day she was there again, and he came out, and she grabbed his coattails again, and she followed him halfway down the street, and he was mightily annoyed, and he decided that something had to be done about her, but he didn't know what to do because she was a poor widow, and he hated to be seen as a great and mighty judge picking on the poor widow. But she was there the next day, and as the days passed, every day, she was still there, and like a thorn in his side, she was utterly tearing his heart out. So finally he talked to himself about her, and he said, "Lest this woman weary me by her continual coming, I will grant her request." Now this is what the majestic sense of victory is all about. It is a recognition and awareness. So, you're a terrible person. You have so many sins and peccadillos by the peck. They're all piled up in one great big heap, you know. And all of your neighbors and friends know just how many faults you have. And you finally decide that maybe they're right. And then you go down and your spirits, like a thermometer in reverse, begin to hit the bottom. That is what we're talking about. You need a majestic sense of victory to come out of that, you see. So the secret of it all is to bother the Lord. You tell him that people have told you how awful you are. And you tell him that you're not sure whether they're right or not. So you say, "My Father, you know what I really am, and you know where I need correction because you are not biased or prejudiced. You want me to be everything you are, so will you please help me as I reach out to attain this majestic sense of victory and overcoming." Now this simple story can bring you your ascension, what I'm telling you tonight. Because people are going to make you a target, and those arrows and slings of outrageous misfortune will come at you so long as you live until you quit paying any attention to them. And I have decided tonight, after I received a poison pen letter from someone in this town who didn't have the courage to sign their name to it, I decided that this majestic sense of victory was just the panacea that I needed. So I thought I would pass it on to you, because I think each one of you at some time or other in your life can use this sense. And a little story like this will stick with you. You're going to remember it, and you're going to face life quite well because of it. And it reminds me of Mr. Vandenberg, who was with the United States Chamber of Commerce as the most successful representative. And I one time said, "Mr. Vandenberg, why are you so successful as a representative of the Chamber? Why, you go into people like the governors of states, and you walk into their office, and they look daggers at you, and they are annoyed, and you just carry right on, and you're successful and victorious. What is your secret, Mr. Vandenberg?" And he said, "Well, Mark, it's quite simple." I said, "Yes, well, tell me more." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what it is. As I go in the office, I hold in my mind the thought of that man behind the desk, sit with nothing on but his red flannel underwear." And he said, "When I look at him in his red flannel underwear, he looks so silly that I always laugh, and he tries to grin me down like Davy Crockett did the bear, but he can't do it because, you see, I have that vision of him in that red flannel underwear. And so I just keep right on grinning. Pretty hard to overcome, isn't it? So this is why Sir Thomas More, St. Thomas More to the Catholic Church, and our beloved Master El Morya said long ago, the devil, that proud spirit, cannot stand to be mocked. So we have to learn that the power of darkness is in our world as a duality of evil, even as the power of God is in our world as the power of good. In other words, every one of us has the evil tree, the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in us. And this tree is dual in nature. It tells you so. It's both good and evil. It's the knowledge of good and evil. And that is where Satan has his admission to our world. We have a knowledge of evil. And we also have a knowledge of good. But what is there in the universe? There is no such thing as good and evil. There is only good. But good is superior to good and evil. The good we're talking about is the fruit of the tree of life. That means that we don't see in terms of blacks and whites as most people do, and we don't even see in gray tones. We see only the light, the majestic sense of victory. But you're not going to get this for nothing. It's going to cost you a pretty penny, let me tell you, because you have got to overcome the satanic side of yourself. Get thee behind me, Satan. Jesus was talking to the same powers that existed in him that are in us today. We have all credited Jesus with having the absolute perfection of life manifest in himself, and so he did. But in his flesh, that is to say, in the outer side of him, there was also the potential of the world thought of the evil powers of the world. And therefore he was tempted because he had all this power, as I have been tempted many times and fell a couple times. I'll give you a couple examples. I fell one time long years ago when I first learned how to change traffic lights by changing traffic lights without paying any attention to the people in the street, and as a result I caused utter chaos in the street. And Master Morya came to me and he said, all right, he said, fine, you just keep it up. He said, you'll really have a very sweet little karma for yourself. And I said, well, you mean I can't change traffic lights anymore? And he said, no, I didn't say that. He said, you have to be considerate that you are the policeman who looks both ways to see what's coming and change the traffic lights when it's the proper time to do so. I said, all right. Well, then the other night I was feeling very low because it was my birthday and I'd had a terrible blow delivered on me at my birthday. So Gary Young was driving off and I couldn't stop his car. I couldn't stop him and I started to yell and all I could do was say, Gary, Gary. And that only carried little ways. And so I put a ray on his car and Al Ladd was standing by me. He didn't know what I was doing and I stopped Gary's car and it started and then it died. So, what? Is that right or not? You were standing there. Yeah. So,
it's time to take the ray off. It's time to start yet.
So I put the ray back on. I put the ray back on it again, and it stopped it again. So then about that time I got qualms of conscience, because the only reason I was doing it was because I didn't have a voice, and because I was so downhearted that I wanted to do something to make myself feel a little better, you see. What I needed was a majestic sense of victory. Now, all of us can profit by it. Don't you see that? It's something we can all use. I hope then, seeing that time is chasing me out of business soon, that you will get something out of this that you can take home with you. Because while the ascended masters have the most magnificent dictations and energy and beauty to give to us in these conferences, we must remember that in our lectures we are able to use the informal approach that plops the great jewel of cosmic wisdom into the heart of a rose, because the rose is nice and open, and as the rose is nicely open, you see, we can drop something into it and the rose will accept it. And what we are doing tonight is trying to get you to accept your own God-given grace of a majestic sense of victory. Stop this silly business of thinking that you are inferior to any other person in the universe. You are never going to be anyone else except yourself. Remember that. I don't care if you're skinny, or if you're fat, or if you're old or young, or wise or foolish, or rich or poor. or spiritual or unspiritual or whatever you are still yourself, and any amount of thinking that you want to do will not change that fact. Therefore, you have to deal with the reality of who you are. And remember that every ascended master and cosmic being has at one time or another stood right where you are in their evolutionary development. And this runs the gamut. So therefore, what they did in developing the majestic sense of God victory for themselves was one of the greatest essentials in life, because it stops you from feeling inferior. Almost every person that I have ever dealt with that has had excess pride that I couldn't deal with because of their pride, who got piqued or angry with me or anything else, has always been a person who had an inferiority complex. They were selling themselves down the river. And you know what I think about that? And I've done it myself, but I'm telling you the truth about it. When you sell yourself down the river, dear hearts, you are selling God down the river. God doesn't want you to have a superiority complex, which is the kind of a thing that develops almost in the same manner as a girl who has just broken up with her boyfriend, or a woman who has just divorced her husband and now she's on the rebound. You see what I mean? She's ready to take almost any creature that comes along just because she feels so badly. And of course, this is the way a lot of people are in superiority complexes. They have such a terrible feeling of inferiority that the only thing they can see is to do something to boost their sagging ego and make that ego feel good. Now, whether this includes stomping on somebody else who's under them, or in some way belittling people, or whatever it is, that superiority complex is what they feel is the cure-all for their inferiority complex. And this is absolutely wrong. There is no cure-all for it that will last except recognizing that they have a God-given I am presence, a God-given Holy Christ self, and a God-given soul that they have responsibility for. And the answer to their salvation does not lie in the foolishness of the human ego and its inferior superiority feelings. It lies in the simple faith of a child who will look at the presence and say in full faith, "Give me, O God presence, a majestic sense of victory." Do you see what I mean? You have got to get that majestic sense of victory and fix in your mind that that is the cure-all for your inferiority and superiority. Your life is not whimsical. It's not a case of whimsy. Somebody just determines, well, maybe I'll get better because I'll get better, which sounds like Gertrude Stein. I mean, it isn't going to work that way. You are going to get better because you determine to develop a majestic sense of victory in your own consciousness, and because God is your victory. God is my victory. If you will understand that and keep pestering the Lord like the unjust widow pestered the judge, you will sooner or later have him on your side, because he'll get so tired of your bothering him, because he's in you, don't you see? He's in you. And the God in you will get tired of being pestered. He knows what you want by now, and he says, look, least this woman weary me, I will give her what she wants. And by that time, your subconscious mind finally understands that you want your victory. You want your majestic sense of victory, because that's the key to your victory. If you don't have the sense of it, if you're looking to outer conditions, or outer people, persons, places, conditions, or things, and you think you're going to get your happiness and your God victory out of these things, then you're never going to have it. You'll always be struggling like a yo-yo. You'll go up and you'll go down, you'll go down, you'll go up and back and forth. And you'll be a variable that never really attains anything. And what's more, you'll only be kidding yourself that you love God. Because most people who say they love God in the final test are the weakest people on the face of this earth, because they have not received the majestic sense of victory. I can prove it to you. I could prove it right now. I could take several people in this room up here, and I could give them a couple of little castigations for some of the things they've done in the past year. There's one young man in the audience here that I talked to last night, and I told him a few things he'd done, and I think the world of him. He knows that I knew what's inside of him because I can read it in his aura. And I could go very deep, as Jesus went very, very deep into people's aura and find out these things. And I guarantee you that I could make people in this room here walk out of here and dislike me tonight and say, why, he's a terrible man. I absolutely guarantee you, because some people in the room, and not many, But some people are still functioning in that plane. But you know something? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it at all. But what I am going to do, I'm going to ask you to try the majestic sense of victory for 1 year. Stop this nonsense of thinking your victory lies in the human. And every time somebody bothers you or pesters you or speaks to you in a downward trend tone, where they try to make you feel like, what do you want? Or, why are you here? Or they'll say, I don't know, fella. And a lot of other different tones that people use, you know, to let you know how very much better they are than you are. Well, if you feel that you're not so good, or you feel you're so much better than they are because they said it that way, in either case you see you're wrong. You can't win for losing. So the whole point is, these are the little signals that tell you exactly where you are. And so finding out where you are, don't be sorry, because now you can do something about it. It's a lot worse not to know where you are, and therefore be unable to do a thing about it, than it is to know where you are and be able to do something about it. So I say to you, as I look at you now, I don't see your auras at all. I only see your Holy Christ selves around everybody, and you all look like beautiful saints. And I see your God presence coming down all around you, and just light, light, light everywhere. And so I say to myself, they're all developing now a majestic sense of victory, and maybe by the time Lord Gautama finishes, they'll all be ascended, and we won't have to worry about anything anymore at all. This is my dream for 1969. By 1970, I'll be more realistic. All right, I'm through now. Have your song, and where are the petitions?
Would you stand?
Mighty I am, God presence in the heart of the great central sun, thou who beholdest all the thoughts of the children of men, we ask that you will receive, Blessed One, these thoughts and petitions, entered then to the councils of the Karmic Board for the purposes of producing those responses that will enable further opportunities to come to these petitioners. We therefore offer these in the holy name of God I Am, in the name of the entire spirit of the Great White Brotherhood, for the glory of God revealed amongst us, to our edification and glorification of thy principle and plan. In the name of the Lord Christ Jesus and the entire Brotherhood of Light, we ask that it be done. Amen.
As they are burning, let us sing number 91.
Late petitions may be forwarded to the fireplace.
Number 91.
Now be seated. Your petitions are going up mingled with pine boughs, and outside the property in the cool and clear night air, the white smoke of your petitions is wending its way and will be carried by the angelic host, because those words come from your hearts to the great Karmic Board, just as surely as though it were sent by letter carrier or by telegraph or radio or any other means. God is not mocked. What men have put down in their hearts is known to him. And this dramatic way of communication with the Karmic Board is and has been through the centuries a part of the Great White Brotherhood's annual pageantry of contacting the deity and projecting forth our wishes and thoughts as we see them. As it is written, God give us the right to do the right as we see it. And this is the whole thought. Without vision the people perish.